trying to understand what is the root cause of a thing, and really understanding, kind of getting down to the root of it, really trying to understand, how do you solve this? Instead of solving the symptoms of issues, how do you start to solve the main issue? So I want to talk today about shame, because in a lot of the conversations that I'm having about divorce, what I'm recognizing is this thread of shame. And it's not just divorce. I think it's happening all over. And so I started to do a little bit of research around the topic and understanding what is just what's happening here. Why is there this shame attached to so many things in our lives? And so I am not a psychotherapist or a psychologist. However, I'm curious. My background is in science, and so I was that kid always in the science fairs, always trying to figure out why something happens, how it works. And so naturally, that's an extension to what I'm doing today. And so we are going to talk about this and talk about shame and try to understand sort of what dynamic is happening when it comes to divorce and how shame interplays with that. So make sure that you are liking, that you share, that you follow this What's in It for the Black People Media and the I Do, I Did, I Don't page. I want you to help other people to have this content, help other people to be free. You know, we are trying to honestly live our best lives. And live our best lives, I don't mean that in a way that's just sort of cliche of what people say today and you're out doing any and everything, but we're trying to be healthy and whole. And that's what this broadcast is about, is really trying to understand, what can we do? What can we do differently? When you know better, you do better, right? So what shall we do with this topic of shame? So I'm going to share a little bit of audio from a TED Talk with Brene Brown. Brene Brown is a researcher, and she's a trained therapist, but she's also a researcher, and she did a lot of work around vulnerability to start with. And I don't know if you've seen this or heard of this, but at some point she's giving a talk. She's talking about vulnerability. And you know how you have you have an emotional reaction that you don't expect to happen. So you're talking about something, and before you know it, you're emotional, and you're just kind of like, voice is cracking, and you have to pause, and you're like, I'm sorry, That's what happened to her while she's having this talk. And her talk and her research is about vulnerability and shame, and she realized in that moment, very publicly, that she hadn't dealt with some stuff, and she had a breakdown. And so you can go back and watch a lot of the video to understand what really happened to her and how that impacted her. Just really, she wound up with 4 million views, and just, it's gone completely viral and absolutely great. But this happened years ago. So I want us to talk about this issue of shame, because as I talk to people, what I realize, especially in women, because I have more conversations typically with women about the issue around divorce, is this sense of shame. This shame of, how did I get here? This shame of, how did I let this happen? Especially women who are professional, who are they're smart. They're smart. They're professional. Maybe they aren't professional, but maybe they are very wise, and they're looked to for counsel. And now all of a sudden they find themselves in this crazy, crazy situation, and they're trying to understand, how did I get here? But oftentimes they're ashamed of the fact that they are there. And they're ashamed of the fact that society looks at them in a condemning way. And so let's talk about this a little bit. And so we're going to walk through a little bit about shame first and kind of just walk you through the video. So let's start with the first part there.
And I had to write down the name of this TED Fellow so I didn't mess it up here. Mishkin Ingawale. I hope I did right by you. I saw the TED Fellows my first day here, and he got up and he explained how he was driven to create some technology to help test for anemia because people were dying unnecessarily. And he said, I saw this need, so you know what I did? I made it. And everybody just burst into applause, and they were like, yes. And he said, and it didn't work. And then I made it 32 more times. And then it worked. You know what the big secret about TED is? I can't wait to tell people this. I guess I'm doing it right now. This is like the failure conference. No, it is.
Okay, I think I'm gonna.
You know why this place is amazing?
Fast forward this a little bit, figure out exactly.
Because very few people here are afraid to fail. And no one that gets on the stage so far that I've seen has not failed. I have failed miserably. Many times. I don't think the world understands that because of shame. There's a great quote that saved me this past year by Theodore Roosevelt. A lot of people refer to it as the man in the arena quote. And it goes like this. It is not the critic who counts. It is not the man who sits and points out how the doer of deeds could have done things better and how he falls and stumbles. The credit goes to the man in the arena, whose face is marred with dust and blood and sweat. But when he's in the arena at best, he wins, and at worst he loses. But when he fails, when he loses, he does so daring greatly. And that's what this conference to me is about. That's what life is about daring greatly, about being in the arena. When you walk up to that arena and you put your hand on the door and you think, I'm going in and I'm going to try this, shame is the gremlin who says, you're not good enough. You never finished that MBA. Your wife left you. I know your dad really wasn't in Luxembourg, he was in Sing Sing. I know those things that happened to you growing up. I know you don't think that you're pretty enough or smart enough or talented enough or powerful enough. I know your dad never paid attention even when you made CFO. Shame is that thing. And then if we can quiet it down and walk in and say, I'm going to do this, we look up and the critic that we see pointing and laughing 99% of the time is who? Us. Shame drives two big tapes, never good enough. And if you can talk it out of that one, who do you think you are?
All right. So that's a good place for us to stop. A lot said there. She gave a little bit of background because this was a TED Talk. But she started to talk about, one, this sense of she gave us the poem, right? The Man in the Mirror. And she talked, not the Man in the Mirror, goodness. I'm thinking music right now, the man in the arena. And essentially talked about the person that really should get the credit is the person that's in it, that's doing it, that is trying and courageous enough to give it a shot, whether they fail or whether they win. And I think that's what happens with us in marriage is we are courageous enough to give it a shot. Maybe some might say we're naive enough to give it a shot, right? We give it a shot and it may not work. We may fail, but hopefully we have taken the bumps, the bruises, the body shots, the emotional shots, and all of the wonderful things that come with it too. Let's not pretend like it's just all bad. But even when it doesn't work, we've learned something. We've learned something about ourselves. We've learned something about the relationship, about relationships in general. And hopefully we're taking that information forward in a more powerful way, not in a way that feels like we are not good enough. Because I hear a lot of things like, oh, well, I'm good enough to be a girlfriend, but not good enough to be a wife. Or I'm not pretty enough. I'm not thin enough. My hair is not long enough. I don't make enough money from the guy side. Or, I'm maybe you're balding and you feel a little self-conscious, or you got a little. All these things kind of play into this piece about shame. But this is what I see happening when it comes to divorce. As she talked about this last part. You're not good enough. And who do you think you are? And I think that happens when we get to this place of divorcing and deciding that we want something different for our lives. Then comes the, who do you think you are? Excuse me. So it comes in that, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to divorce me? I'm the prize. I'm the person that makes the money. I'm the person that provides the child care. I'm the person who everybody is after. Who do you think you are to do this? But then on the other side, it's the person who wants the divorce who's, well, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to go back into the workplace to get a job and support myself because I've been out of the workplace for so long. I'm not good enough to get another guy, another woman, because fill in the blank, right? We have all these different reasons for why we're not good enough. And it stops many of us from moving forward in the power that we have to change our lives and to affect the life that we want to have, because we are stopping ourselves with our own thought process of not being good enough, of I can't do this by myself. I can't raise the children by myself, or I don't have the support network that I need to have, or whatever it is. We are many times, many of us stay in relationships that are clearly not working, that are clearly detrimental to us because we feel like we're not good enough. We're not good enough for whatever that other thing is, right? And so many times, though, we keep trying. We keep trying. So I want to, think about this. We have built for ourselves in this society some societal norms, right? That dictate to us how we're supposed to behave, what's okay, what's not. Some of us, this sense of shame is really rooted around how society sees this, right? So you're getting a divorce and you fail. I still can't not understand why there's such emotional negativity associated with divorce when it happens half the time. It happens half the time. It's like this really weird cognitive dissonance going on with us as a society and how we think about this. So I want you to think about that. Like, where are you in this process? Are you in the I do, I don't, the I did stage, where you're in that I did stage, but you aren't moving back either in power now, moving back to I do, because you're deciding, here's what I want. I'm not going to be ashamed about that. I'm going to ask for it. And either this person can provide it or they can't. And either way, it's okay. Or are you moving toward the I don't stage and you're trying to figure out, how do I get there? I'm stuck in this I did phase, but I'm not making a decision to move forward either way. I'm just here because maybe I have shame about how this looks societally. Maybe I have shame about how this looks or feels in the church. And here's the thing, y'all. A lot of times, this is what shame, I think, looks like as it comes to us when we're sitting in that I did place. Well, he or she has a really good job. There's some benefit for you there. Why would you leave? Or, but what about the kids? The kids need both parents at home. The kids aren't going to be well because you're divorced. There are all these negative things that can happen. Even little stuff like, well, you're not going to have the same last name as your kids anymore. Shame, right? You're going to walk around with 3 children now and don't have a husband. You don't have a ring on. Shame. Because who's looking at me and thinking, oh, I don't have, she must be one of those that's, 3 babies by 3 different baby daddies. And so these things do matter to us and weigh on us. We're not always touching, really tapping into the fact that this is what we're feeling and really naming it, but it's there. It's there, and it creates a great deal of pause and disempowerment for us because we're not thinking about that and facing it and making our decision to move forward one way or the other, standing in our own power. All right, so I want you all to really just kind of think about that. And then let's try the next clip, because she starts to talk a little bit more, walking you into shame, is talk a little bit more about what shame is and what shame isn't.
It's not guilt. Shame is a focus on self. Guilt is a focus on behavior. Shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. How many of you, if you did something that was hurtful to me, would be willing to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake? How many of you would be willing to say that? Guilt. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Shame. I'm sorry, I am a mistake. There is a huge difference between shame and guilt. And here's what you need to know. Shame is highly, highly correlated with addiction, depression, violence, aggression, bullying, suicide, eating disorders. And here's what you even need to know more. Guilt, inversely correlated with those things. The ability to hold something we've done or failed to do up against who we want to be is incredibly adaptive. It's uncomfortable, but it's adaptive. Mm-hmm. The other thing you need to know about shame is it's absolutely organized by gender.
So we're going to stop
there. If shame washes over me and washes over...
I want to come back to that organized by gender part. We'll do that one next. But as she just said, shame is not guilt. It's not guilt. Guilt is I did something bad. I did a bad thing, took a bad action, made a bad decision, any of those things. But that can easily become I'm a bad person. I don't have good judgment. I picked the wrong guys. I picked the wrong women. I didn't do this right. Something, it becomes the shame piece really takes hold. And I am seeing this way too much in women. And it is really, really sitting heavily on me because, and I think it's there with guys too. It just looks different. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But I'm seeing so many women, one, embarrassed. I think embarrassment, let's talk about these definitions, because embarrassment is a little different from shame or guilt. Embarrassment is, I could have done the right thing. Let's just talk about right now, today. I'm going to wear my mask. I walk into a place and nobody else has a mask on. I'm a little embarrassed by the fact that everyone responds to me in a certain way. So it's more about the social response to an action that's embarrassment, right? So how does that look in divorce now? I'm embarrassed that we were just talking about this, right? I'm embarrassed now that I have 3 children and I'm not married. I'm embarrassed that I'm not in a great financial place now because I've had to split my estate in divorce. Or I'm embarrassed that that's going to even happen to me. I'm embarrassed that I am still in a relationship that I know is killing me, is not serving me well, but I'm still there. I'm still there. I'm embarrassed that we're sleeping in different rooms and people don't know that, or people do. They realize they can look at us and tell this isn't quite working. Or I'm embarrassed that I'm still faking the funk. I show up at church every Sunday like this is the great marriage, and I'm making all my Facebook posts and it's wonderful and good, and it's not, right? And so I'm embarrassed when people learn that or find out about that or get some insight into that in the way they respond to me. But shame and guilt is about your actions. So now I'm guilty that I haven't been the best spouse. I'm guilty. I feel guilty about the fact that I don't help as much with the children. I feel guilty about the fact that I don't earn as much on an equal level to contribute financially in the same way. I feel guilty about the fact that I cheated. Or I feel guilty about the fact that I have an emotional affair with someone else. And so those kinds of things then now can easily start to move you into this shame space, right? So now I feel guilty because I'm a bad person. And I think many times people don't move forward in their power because they feel like, I feel guilty I didn't do everything that I could do. I want to feel like I've done everything that I could do in my power. And I think that's a very honorable position to take. It really, truly is. But I also think that it can be very detrimental for us to continue into something that really isn't serving us well, is really killing us, honestly. And I don't mean, all right, we're having a bad patch. That's not what I mean. I mean, this has been a clear pattern. It is clearly not working for you. It hasn't worked for you for a very long time, and nothing is changing. Nothing's changing. Nobody's working on it. You know, maybe you two have just decided, you know what, we just gonna be ghetto married, and I'm gonna go and do me over here. She can do her over there, and we think that's best for the kids because we're together and in the same household. Like the kids aren't peeping what's going on or have some sense of what's happening. So we fool ourselves, but honestly, sometimes it's because we're not being honest with ourselves and really understanding. We're feeling this shame, and this shame is stopping us from moving forward. So I see so many people who are not moving forward with a decision one way or the other because they're stuck in this cycle of shame because they want the marriage to work and they don't want to be 50 and divorced. They don't want to be out here. You know, they had this image of having this perfect family, and now that's not the case. Or they don't want to start over. They don't want to have to lose the home that they've had all of their most of their life. They want to continue what that is. And so the shame of being that person in your family who was doing great and the one who had the great marriage that now is falling apart, and oh, look, you know, you're like us, right? All of that plays into people, unfortunately, making decisions to stay in toxic situations. And so I'm talking through this because it's like I said, it's been kind of heavy on me in hearing the shame in women, particularly women, and really helping them to move forward from a place of power, not of embarrassment about what people are going to think or say, not of guilt over an action that they may have taken, or guilt over the fact that they want to be divorced now, and not from a place of shame. I am not a good person. I'm a terrible person for wanting to do this, for wanting to break up my family, for wanting. No, you're not a terrible person for that. You're a terrible person because of the way that you're treating yourself. We don't think about that. And let me say that differently. I don't want to say that. I don't want to say you're a terrible person. What we don't think about is, am I a terrible person to myself? Am I a terrible person to me? Am I treating myself well? Because many times we're so worried about what everybody else says, thinks, does, all of that, and how that's going to impact us. But we are not thinking and giving as much weight to ourselves and our well-being. So let's talk about this piece around shame being organized by gender that she was starting to talk about, because this gets really interesting to me.
It's going to feel the same. Everyone sitting in here knows the warm wash of shame. We're pretty sure that the only people who don't experience shame are people who have no capacity for connection or empathy. Which means, yes, I have a little shame. No, I'm a sociopath. So I would opt for, yes, you have a little shame. Shame feels the same for men and women, but it's organized by gender. For women, the best example I can give you is Anjali, the commercial.
It's before our time.
I can put the wash on the line, pack the lunches, hand out the kisses, and be work at 5 to 9. I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in the pan, and never let you forget you're a man. For women, shame is do it all, do it perfectly, and never let them see you sweat. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much perfume that commercial sold, but I guarantee you it moved a lot of antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds.
So, shame for women. A lot of that is wrapped up in, I cannot do the impossible. I can't do it all because society tells me that I should be able to do all of that. Just like the commercial says, basically, I'm going to take care of the home. I'm going to take care of everyone. I'm going to work. And then I am going to please satisfy my man, stroke his ego, make sure that he feels like he's a man in a way that he needs to feel. It's impossible. And we continue to try to do it. And then when we can't, we feel like we failed and we feel shame over that. And it's so unfair. It's so unfortunate. It's so crazy that this is the way that society has conditioned us to see ourselves and to think about our worth as women, as wives, as mothers. We have to be able to do all of it. All of it. And when we don't, we think we're failing. What we don't think is this is now creating depression. It's creating anxiety. It's creating addictions because we're still trying to cope with it. And we're still trying to do what absolutely should not be expected of us. We have to look the best, keep the figure, keep the makeup tight, everything, all of it has to be perfect. And we don't realize that that in itself is the root of a lot of the issues that we're facing. But it's really hard to disentangle from it, right? Because this is what we've been told. This is what we see. This is what continues to be reinforced. And I'm glad that there's a little bit of a reckoning and an awakening happening now when we're seeing people more openly talk about the fact that they need to take care of their mental health and well-being. Because this type of thinking that we have to be perfect, that we have to do it all is absolutely what contributes to, as she said, that commercial likely sold a lot of depressants and antidepressants and anxiety medication, because it is giving us this very unrealistic, picture of what we need to be. And then when we don't meet that, we failed. And now we're ashamed of it. And so now I'm getting divorced because I failed. I failed to be the best wife. I failed to be the best mom. I failed to be, the executive and the soccer mom and, the porno star in the bedroom. I failed to massage his ego at every turn and make him feel like a man when it's kind of impossible. The expectation is ridiculous, but we're still trying to do it. And so we think that we failed, and not that the expectation shouldn't be. So let's get to the piece around what shame looks like for guys.
Is an epidemic in our culture.
Shame is an epidemic.
To get out from underneath it, to find our way back to each other, we have to understand how it affects us and how it affects the way we're parenting, the way we're working, the way we're looking at each other. Very quickly, some research by Mahalik at Boston College. He asked, what do women need to do to conform to female norms? The top answers in this country: nice, thin, modest, and use all available resources for appearance. When he asked about men, what do men in this country need to do to conform with male norms? The answers were: always show emotional control, work is first, pursue status, and violence. If we're going to find our way back to each other, we have to understand and know empathy, because empathy is the antidote to shame. If you put shame in a petri dish, it needs three things to grow exponentially: secrecy, silence, and judgment. If you put the same amount of shame in a petri dish and douse it with empathy, it can't survive. The two most powerful words when we're in struggle: me too.
So she said, shame, what it is fueled upon is secrecy, silence, and I forgot the other one. Go back for me, Reese, so I can get that one.
Grow exponentially, conform to female norms. The top out from underneath it. To find our way back to each other, we have to understand how it affects us and how it affects the way we're parenting, the way we're working, the way we're looking at each other. Very quickly, some research by Mahalik at Boston College. He asked, what do women need to do to conform to female norms? The top answers in this country: nice, thin, modest, and use all available resources for appearance. When he asked about men, what do men in this country need to do to conform with male norms? The answers were: always show emotional control, work is first, pursue status, and violence. If we're going to find our way back to each other, we have to understand and know empathy, because empathy is the antidote to shame. If you put shame in a petri dish, it needs 3 things to grow exponentially: secrecy, silence, and judgment. If you put the same amount of shame in a petri dish and douse it with empathy, it can't survive.
All right, there we are. Secrecy, silence, and judgment. And unfortunately, that's what I see a lot of. A lot when it comes to divorce, there's a lot of secrecy. There's a lot of, I don't want people to know this. I don't necessarily want to talk about it. And so we don't get the information that we need to protect ourselves in the process, to walk through it in a way that's going to be healthy, in a way that is going to feel empowered, because we don't want anybody to know. We don't want anybody to know that we failed, and we feel this in their eyes, at least, that we failed. And then we feel the shame, and we have to sit with that. We'd rather not let people know this. We'd rather stay silent. Let's not talk about, what happened to me. Let's not talk about, and this is our culture, right? When there are abuses or issues, we've been taught over the years, don't talk about it. Let's not talk about racism. Let's not talk about sexism in the workplace. Let's not talk about ageism in the workplace. Let's not talk about what happens in our household that's dysfunctional and absolutely incorrect. Let's not talk about, this is a good one. Let's not talk about homosexuality in the church. Let's remain silent. Let's pretend it isn't happening. And so that's what we have learned to do. And that is what we continue to do. And we build that into our own relationships as well. So let's not talk about these problems. Let's not talk to our families about it, who might have some wisdom and may be able to help us, right? But let's not talk about it. And then when we do talk about it, if we're brave and courageous enough to do that, what happens is we get things like, well, that's the only problem? Like, because you must be tripping. He cheated one time? Okay, so is he still working? Is he still bringing a check home? You just feel like you're not compatible, but you got to find a fine woman there. Why would you leave that? Why would you leave her? Why would you do that? And so we get all of these reactions that honestly just move us right back into the silence because we feel shame. And so if we continue in that secrecy, that silence, and then the judgment, those statements I just talked about, those judgmental statements that can come, then we remain in this place of shame, and we cannot break out and move forward with what we want to do, break out in power. And it was, it's just been so clear to me lately that many women are caught here. And what I find, honestly, is it's a lot of professional women that get caught in this place. And they are really afraid of the shame that will be, the shame that they feel, and the embarrassment that is ascribed to them by society in order to move forward. And it stops us in our tracks, and we deal with nonsense that we don't have to deal with. And unfortunately, that continuing to stay in that place becomes even more detrimental for us, because now you've created a pattern. Now you've created a status quo when it comes to the law in terms of divorce. So let's just say you have a spouse who decides, you're doing all of this. Okay, great. I'm just not going to work anymore. I'm going to work on my entrepreneurial pursuits. That's what I want to do. And you're like, okay, I believe in my man. I'm a support his dream. Let me go ahead and help this. I might even invest in help. Let me help you get started with some seed money. Let me help you with whatever that is. And so now you do these things, and 4 years later, he's still not working, and you're like, yeah, I'm not for this. Like, we've been clear for the past 4 years that this needed to do something. Okay, I was with you the first year, but now you're stuck in this pattern. And how does the court see that now? Because you're ashamed to move forward, to move out of it, right? So you stay, and you're trying to figure it out. You want it to work. You're still trying. But now you've gotten to a place where the court says, well, all right, well, now that you've established this is the status quo, that you pay for everything, and he hasn't had a job, you're going to have to pay him spousal support, aka alimony. And you're like, what? Yeah. And so we're not aware of a lot of these things, which is one of the reasons that I work to break this cycle of shame, to break the cycle of not having the conversations openly and appropriately, right? But to empower ourselves. And yes, there are so many times we're around these people and our family, and they mean well in a lot of cases. It may not come across there. There's a difference between their intention and the impact that can have on you. But people really do, I think a lot of times, most of the times, the people that love us mean us well, and they don't want us to make a mistake. And so they encourage us to stay. They encourage us to figure it out. They encourage us to go to counseling again. They encourage us to pray about it. They encourage us to try a little bit harder. And I think there's absolutely a place for that. But at some point, we have to be honest. And we have to have those difficult conversations about, is this working or not? Are we vested in making this work? Are we going to put the effort in that's required to make this a marriage that we want to have, that we want to see, that we can both sign up for? Because if not, then, all right, let's decide now what we're going to do. Or we've tried it. We have honestly given this a shot, and it is just not working for us. It's not, I can't be the person you want me to be. I can't do what you're asking me to do. And so, all right, let's decide, what are we going to do from here? But when you don't make a decision and you keep yourself sitting in that shame, silent about what's happening with you, and in this sort of secret place because you're afraid of the judgment, or you've experienced the judgment, and you're not okay with it, then we wind up hurting ourselves even more, because we have set the stage for the status quo now that the law is going to look at as, this is the way you guys have clearly decided to run this relationship. And so given that, here are the rules, here are the laws around how this ends now. So I do this show because for me, I understand how we can be caught in this place of shame, in this place of judgment. And it is so hard to step out of that and decide, this is what I want and need for me. F everybody else. This is what I need. This is what I want to be well. And then to start to create your plan for what you need to do. Everyone deserves to have what they need and what they want and to be well. Both men and women in a relationship. And if it's not working, okay, it's not working. Let's learn from it, and let's be vulnerable enough to give it a shot again if we want to, or let's not. If we're just like, nope, I'm good, I'm done, that's okay. Either way. But I don't want us to sit in this shame of, the church says that we should not get divorced, and now we're getting divorced. Or I want a divorce because it's not working, right? Or the shame of, my parents were married for 50 years and they worked through all sorts of crazy drama life situations. and I'm not strong enough to do that in my marriage, or I'm not willing to make the decision to do that in my marriage, or I'm older now and this didn't work out. Or another one, I met my spouse online, which happens a lot now, right? But I also see people that are like, the judgment of, well, maybe you didn't do that the right way. Maybe you didn't really know the person when you married them. But you did it anyway. And now look at that. Surprise, surprise, it doesn't work. So there are all these things that happen to us and all these things that are ascribed to us, but there are also so many of them are internal to us. And so I want you to think about that and think about the people that are around you in terms of the shame that can be associated with being in a place where you're trying to figure out, do I want to continue this or do I not? And do not let shame drive your decisions. There's a very appropriate place for shame, definitely. But I'm not talking about that right now. I'm talking about the shame that keeps you bound, that keeps you imprisoned because you don't want the judgment, and you stay silent and it continues to get worse. So I want you to be well. I want you to be well on the other side of it. I think this is one of those topics that it's a heavy one for me, but I want you to make sure that you share this with others, because there are many people in our circle that are going through these issues and we don't necessarily know it. But if you suspect it, share it. All right. So this has been Tasha with I Do, I Did, I Don't on What's in It for the Black People Media. Thank you for joining. I hope that this has been great information for you to be well on the other side. Thanks so much and have a blessed day.